Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate being part of this panel and being your inaugural 2025 speaker. I'm so excited to speak about food. It's one of my favorite things in the world. It sustains us, it sustains me, gives me plenty to research and write and teach and talk about. And I guess I framed my entire career around food. And I'm not surprised because it's a gathering thing, breaking bread, getting together with people. It is a tradition that humans have always done, and I think that I acknowledge the congregation in it. So I love telling stories too. So having stories to tell about food, and that's what we're doing is going to be focusing on traditional foods in New Haven and some of the really outstanding particular foods, people, stories, events, themes that surround it. So I'm going to start off not with pizza, as some of you see. I'm going to start off with something that's going to work. Perhaps my screen will help me. We're going to start off with actually going back to the Native Americans and going back to the Quinnipiac and talking about something that they ate, which is the seafood here. So in the summers, they spent times in the village of Miuntuk on the very south part of this map. New Haven is presently what is now known as the area called Path right there. It's an old shore path. Well, Miuntuk was the east shore on the annex of New Haven, and they also had a village in East Haven, as we know. And in the summers, they ate lots of seafood, anything from the ocean. And so we think of foods like that, like oysters. We became a major oyster place. And also, in this article snippet from 1895 from the New Haven Journal and Courier, I highlighted a section. They acknowledge an old Indian village, as they called it, at Red Rock, which is now Ferry and Farron Avenues in New Haven, Ferry Street and Farron Avenue. And there's an oyster shell deposit that was found 2 feet underground. And this deposit was noted to be where their village site was. It was a refuse place. And we find these mounds, these oyster shell mounds across the East Coast, and they represent village and they represent life. So thousands of years of people living here. And what's the deal with oysters? Well, we still have them, and we've been using them for so long, to the point where our city became a center of oyster production, both for food and for industrial uses, for road building, for lime, you name it. There's so many things that you can do with oyster shells, and we can start seeing these right here. This is the Jeremiah and Sons at City Point. Excuse me, no, this is the Smith brothers in Fairhaven. This is the F. Mansfield and Son wholesale oyster dealers over in Fairhaven as well. You can see the Ferry Street Bridge behind. And then finally, we've got another mound looking up into Fairhaven Heights, just showing some of the ways that this became adapted by the European descended colonists and African Americans who lived here. A lot of jobs in Fairhaven specifically were around the oyster industry. Jeremiah Smith and Sons were at City Point, which is part of the Hill, presently where Shell and Bones, aptly named, is located. And you can see that they are very, very proud of their oyster shell mound, their massive dock of oysters. You can imagine the deliciousness, but you can still see these mounds over on the Quinnipiac River. There's presently a site that makes them and piles them up. They produce them out of the water. But we can also help and thank this guy, Charles Hervey Townsend of the Townsend family, Townsend Avenue. They were on the East Shore. They also had their own Townsend Wharf and trading to the very far east. And it was Mr. Charles Hervey Townsend that created the breakwaters in New Haven and also seeded the first seeding in America of oysters from Chesapeake Bay up to New Haven Bay, which is New Haven Harbor, and Long Island Sound. So he was a very, very ingenuitive man. And then you can see this map from the Yale Archives in 1916 showing oyster grounds and all of these plots. This is actually the harbor. This isn't land that you're seeing. So in the middle is all the plots of land that were deeded to different families or businesses that where they could actually harvest their oysters. Now, we're going to change subjects, go fast forward a little bit, something a little bit sweeter. And we're going to be talking about the curry family, and not curry like the dish or the spice, but curry family is James David Curry, who was born in Marion County, Florida. That's north central Florida. He was a very a very good skilled entrepreneur, and his thing was making confections. He made all sorts of cakes and candies. His biggest thing was candies. It was known as Curry's Sweet Shop, and he was a black man with a black owned business, and he was considered to be one of the first successful confection businesses owned by a black family. And it was started in 1929 on at 170 Dixwell Avenue in New Haven. We can see the look of Dixwell Avenue from about 1930. This photo is looking up from the corner of about Webster Street, looking north. On the left-hand side, there's a building in the distance, and we're going to look and zoom in. And we're going to see the building in the distance. There's a two-story building with an awning in front, and that's where his sweet shop was. This would be the time period that his shop was there. And so just to give a little reference, I love using images to help describe my stories because it helps us get into this picture. And his son, James David Curry Jr., known as Jimmy, also entered into the business, and he and his family lasted into the 50s, and they were making these candies. They actually moved up the street, closer to Henry Street, but they were so well known and so well liked that their candies were bought by white families. The unfortunate thing is because of the color of their skin and because of the kind of racism that existed, especially back then, they were asked to deliver these candies in the evening so people wouldn't see that a black family actually made their candies into a white shop. And I think today we can talk about this. Back then they did not. Speaking of candy, there is this wonderful candy called a lollipop. And I love this story because it goes back to this one company out of New Haven, started in 1892, called the Bradley Smith, three partners. They made all sorts of candies. They even named one after Yale. But they were very popular. And the lollipop, something we take for granted today, a taffy on a stick, well, that was something that they made in this large factory. They moved to this factory in the the late 1800s, early 1900s, and this was on Hill Street, no longer there. Big factory, added over time, hundreds of workers here making candy. And George Smith came up with this new idea of the taffy on a stick. He had seen it before, but he named it the lollipop after a winning horse that he saw at a fairground. And he liked that idea. It kind of stuck. And he ended up talking to some people who worked with him, including a man named Max Buchmuller, who was one of his foremen. And Max actually thought, hey, why are we doing this by hand? We're taking sticks and sticking them into this taffies. It's a lot of work. We're hand pounding each one. Why don't we make a machine? So he invented and patented this machine in 1909. Actually, it was applied in 1909, accepted in 1914 for the manufacture of lollipops, which you can see there in highlight. And then here's an image of the machine from the patent. Try to make that today. I mean, these are complex machines with really refined parts, but they eventually could make over 150 lollipops in an hour at a time with multiple machines just like this. And this really changed the lollipop industry, I'll tell you. Like, we knew what that was. And guess what? Bradley Smith Company may not be around anymore. They lasted another 50 years. Many other companies took on the lollipop name, but a middle school student who I know in Fairfield has been lobbying and finally successfully lobbied for the lollipop to be Connecticut state candy, which happened last year. And here you can see Eyewitness News 7 from New York City talking all about it. And it shows you how a little idea could go a long way. And then somebody else having the acknowledgement of this can go a long, long way as well. So keep always pursuing your dreams. Ooh, I love sweets. No, I don't. I'm actually more of a savory guy, but I love talking about sweets. So here's Mounds. Everyone may be taking for granted all the candies you see at the store or wherever you see candies these days. Mounds being one of them. It's a famous one. The company that made them is called Peter Paul. They also made Almond Joy. And this is just from a cartoon that they put out as an advertisement. I'm not going to go through, but I want to show you how this has become part of our daily lives. Well, this man, his name was Peter Halajian, eventually renamed Peter Paul. He was an Armenian born in Turkey and escaping the Balkan Wars and some of the issues going on in Turkey. He came to New Haven and actually to Naugatuck and started in the candy business. And he invented Mounds in New Haven when he started his company in 1919. And he started making Mounds, which is basically just coconut sweetened inside of a chocolate. It's a great idea. He did that in 1920, and we can see his trademark application in 19 21. And here he was acknowledging that he has been making it since 1920. And so this is one of the earlier Mounds wrappers. It shows you their original sort of Mounds image that they would use on their wrapper. And then here's a close-up of a trade mag. This particular one, which I'm sure you all read, is important. It's a candy magazine, but it says Peter Paul Candy Manufacturing has been making it since 1920. So we understand that now. This is actually where he made it in New Haven. This is Congress Avenue in about 1923 or so, about the time that Peter Paul was there. His building was located just on the left. You can see here in this image here. And so this is near the hospital, looking towards downtown. He only lasted about 3 years in New Haven, and he eventually built a large factory in Naugatuck, which he opened up in 1922. And you know, that Peter Paul has been bought out many times, but they still make it. They still make Almond Joy, and they still make Mounds. Almond Joy was invented in Naugatuck, Mounds in New Haven, and it shows you, oh man, those do look good. I mean, I don't have a sweet tooth, but I will eat things like that. At one time, I'm not sure if this is still true, the factory in Naugatuck was the biggest user of coconuts in America. Pretty cool little fact right there. And then we're going to turn on to a different subject overall about food. And these two women, we should thank a lot for elevating our level of food from just candy, from just seafood, to exquisite dishes. And their names were Frances Roth on the left, professor of law, in fact, the first woman to be accepted into the Connecticut Bar Association, and the woman on the right, Catherine Angel, the wife of the former Yale president, whose son was actually killed in World War II. And they got together, and especially Frances, this is her idea, was to create a school, a college, a learning institute for chefs or people who wanted to become chefs. And so in 1946, right after World War II, they opened this school in the fall and called it the New Haven Restaurant Institute on State Street on the corner of Fair. And they had 55 students in the first year, training how to be chefs. You know, they were doing their best to try to get these vets to do something different in their lives and give them something hopeful. And there's a couple ads here showing you on the left, 1946, the New Haven Restaurant Institute advertising the fall term is beginning. You got to get your space. And then the advertisement on the right, enroll now, because now we've changed the name in 1947 to the Restaurant Institute of Connecticut. And it shows you the naming change is a big deal. They grew fast. By year 3, they had 300 students. They outgrew their space, and they realized they needed to go to a larger space and change their name in 1952 to the Culinary Institute of America. That's right. And that's a big deal because this is and was the first culinary institute outside of France. And it's still a huge deal. It's they call it the CIA, and it's not a secret. So this is an amazing thing. They moved to the house, Mrs. Angel's house, the mansion that we've all known as the Addams family house, because they almost filmed there, also known as the Davies Mansion. And it's part of Yale. They fixed it up. It was abandoned for years after the school left in 73. But the school outgrew this site as well. And you can see here that Mrs. Roth is here with the food director, Harry Herman, inside of that building. You can see stairwells and backsides, and you can see what they're cooking. It looks delicious. I don't know what it is. Dumplings? Something delicious. I want it. And so it shows you this. This is from 1952, this image. She looks very happy. And here's where they moved to, is Hyde Park, New York. I mean, that's gorgeous too, but it ain't New Haven. So, you know, their story kind of I was done with them in 1973. I wasn't born yet, but I was done with it. What a beautiful site. Oh, something crazy is happening with this. That's right. It's the Yale Daily News. They love telling crazy stories with crazy images, but no, the Yale Daily News, 1977, March 1st, shows off, you know, let's just talk about food. They kind of got some artists in, and of course, pizza is going to show up in the 70s. Random pizza counter. This person's clearly in a pizza, you know, coma or pizza zombie mode. And the article on the bottom, eating out a la New Haven, escape Pop-Tarts and pizza. Well, that is a close-up. We're reading something about Claire's Cornucopia, which opened up 2 years ago. Anyone who ventured into old Carmel Corner Shop, and Michael and I were just talking about how that was a chain that had opened up here, making caramel corn. After dark, lacked the brains to pound sand down a rat hole. Today, anyone who doesn't visit the place in its new incarnation as Claire's Corner Copia should be stuck in a bottle and sent out to sea with the Japanese current. That's some writing right there, and that's creative writing. We'll let that go. But they were trying to say, go to Claire's. It's better than what was there before. And we look at an advertisement now, in this case from 1979, and it's now in our fourth year. She's showing off all these delicious things: falafel. There's a a copia of deliciousness. Danny Yo soft frozen yogurt. I mean, look at the things they had, and they didn't start off as vegetarian completely, but they became more and more vegetarian over time. And the woman who started it, Claire Criscuolo Lapia, Claire Lapia Criscuolo, she is of Italian descent. Some of her family comes from Amalfi, and she opened this up in 75 with her husband Frank, and her mother was there for 20 years helping her out. And it was all inspired by her mother's cooking and her mother's ability to share and say, you got to eat, you got to try this, it's going to be good, it's going to make you happy. And you can see the kind of joy this woman embodies, and she's still there in her 50th year. Claire's Cornucopia is this just amazing Yale and Town Institute. So we don't need an institution to tell us that that cake right there could be the best thing you've ever eaten or will ever eat. If you've never had a Claire's Lithuanian coffee cake, you're missing out. So I highly recommend you try it. It's one of their signature dishes. I also love their teas. They have like a special like hibiscus tea. They have fresh pineapple juice. There's all sorts of good things. I remember getting all these kind of yummy Mexican foods that they make as well. So she's written a number of cookbooks as well. She's a big part of our scene, a very open and welcoming place. And, you'll never go wrong there. I think that's one of the testaments to New Haven's food scene. Happy birthday, happy anniversary, I should say. Now on to another scene, a place we miss, a restaurant family that was with us for so long, and they're still here. They're just not running the restaurant. That's Mia's, that's right. And Mia's opened in 1983 on Chapel Street by Japanese-born Yoshi Lai, only sushi place at the time. She had worked previously at another one, Haya's place. Chef Haya was the only other guy making sushi before this. And she, she wanted to make a place that was inviting like home. And it was called Mia's for two reasons. One was Mia is like a temple. Also, her daughter's name is Mia. So you can see some of the description here again in the Yale Daily News, kind of luring students over to this place. And here's Yoshi, years later, of course, moved to Howe Street. And here's our representative Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro giving her a gift. Mia is in the background. I see Bun Lai is on the left. I think I see father in the back there, Mr. Lai. But Yoshi is very humble. She never wanted to show her face or be really in front of anything. And that's part of it, was that family environment. She wanted the food, the family, everyone else to kind of be in the front. But Yoshi, this is your time. And I know them very well as people, growing up with this family. And Bun was somebody that we always questioned. What are you doing, Bun? Bun, you are changing the menu again. You're making a volume, a Bible of crazy stories that seems to ramble on, except that he was onto something. He was making, and was one of the first people in any restaurant business, especially in sushi, to have sustainable food, sustainable sushi, invasive species, and foraging as a base part of his cuisine. He wanted the food to actually be more than what you eat. He wanted it to be kind of a revolution. If you're going to eat it, it should come and be part of a bigger process and a bigger thought. And he's in 2013, when the cicada invasion happened, he came out and said, we're going to have cicadas on the menu. And everybody, even the Denver Post here, said, we got to find out what you're doing. And he got on the show Chopped. He had the Blind Sushi documentary. He's had a lot of show opportunities and rejected a lot more. So, Bun is an ingenuitive genius. And so I think you may not want to eat bugs, but he was telling the world, we better start eating bugs soon if we want protein, because cows ain't the way. And you can see some of the things he was doing. These are crabs, and they're not just any crabs. They're Asian longshore crabs that were taking over, invading our coast and eating all the other things here. So why not eat them? And that's what he did with the Kani Baba, which was this amazing sushi roll. This is a decadent one full of crabs. Sounds dirty, but it was quite delicious. And of course, the President of the United States gave acknowledgement to the Lai family in 2016, the Champions of Change. They were invited to the White House by President Barack Obama. You can see at the bottom, Bun Lai Mia Sushi was part of their innovations panel. And it's an amazing thing. And the whole family got invited to the White House. That's a rare thing for any restaurant family anywhere. And he still has parties once in a while. I'll call them educational forums. This was a pizza making one. We were celebrating last spring. Fun is on your left. I took the photo. There's a whole gathering in his farm in Woodbridge where he really practices what he preaches. And it's everybody coming together. It's everybody making food around a fire. In this case, the pizzas were great. And, there's a gentleman on the right-hand side of this image in yellow who I recall meeting again after many times, but having a great conversation with him. Oh, there he is. That's right. It's Mike Morand. And so you've been caught at Bun's house. Yes, we all come together and party together and celebrate. And that's what Bun does, is he's a celebrator, he's a gatherer. And we miss the restaurant, but acknowledge that the family is a place of love and gathering. And that's what restaurants really are. That's the pizza I made in that oven, by the way. And while I show you this pizza, we're not ready to go to pizza yet. That pizza, it just was good. It was really good. And I'm so sorry to make you so hungry now. You might be asking what's on it. Oh man, there was like crab, olives. I can see some scallions. We went a little off the normal, pizza chart, but the char was there. I'm all about it. And it's a disc. And now that we're talking about discs, well, I guess we shouldn't even try to bake. See, I made this slideshow and I'm talking to myself. I'm telling myself not to bake because of that. That looked good. But we are talking about discs. Frisbee's Delicious Pies. Now, Frisbee, that's a name that should sound familiar. It's a game. But back in the day, especially starting in 1876, Frisbee Pie Company was in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and they made sweet and savory pies. And they advertised. This advertisement was from 1908 from the Bridgeport Times and Evening Farmer. They even advertisement to Yale people. In 1930, the Yale Daily News had Frisbee's pies at all these different places that you could get them, and individually wrapped. They were the pie of pies, if you didn't know. So Yale students were clearly being targeted for Frisbee's pies. And the reason why this is so interesting, and here we go again, this is Grand Avenue. Townies were targeted too. They had delivery trucks all over the state delivering these pies. This is Grand and Wallace looking east. So showing that in this immigrant kind of melting pot neighborhood, they were buying these pies up, bringing them to the stores and bakeries. And they had these pie bottoms that they were very famous for. You bake the pie in this tin, you'd return the tin for 10 cents. So you'd have to pay a deposit, kind of like we do for our bottle deposits in Connecticut. These pie tins were fun because, well, if you flipped them over, they became a Frisbee, like a little sport. And so in 1920, the Connecticut Historical Society had acknowledged, not in 1920, but they acknowledged later that in 1920, Yale students started the tradition of throwing the pie plates and yelling, Frisbee. And so the tradition apparently, according to lore, started that way. And we can see now in 1957, in the Yale Daily News on the left, they were offering the Frisbee game, the space saucer at the Yale Co-op at the time, which was on Broadway. And on the right-hand side, you can see the same year, Whammo, which was the company that created these things, they were advertising them all over the country. For difference, you can see the price differences. That's just messed up. But maybe those are different models. So yes, and Frisbee pies even made the movies, of course. This is our friend Marty from Back to the Future 3, where he uses the Frisbee pie to obviously, save the day. But it's a pretty impressive how, some of the history that happened right here in New Haven becomes worthy of an action movie, I think, every time. And today, Frisbees are still made by Whammo. They make all kinds, ultimates, traditional classics. And it's a pretty amazing thing to think about the legacy behind this that was started out in food. And speaking of a legacy, a man who started in food, the hamburger started supposedly in New Haven by this man, a German immigrant named Louis Lawson. Louis Lawson came to New Haven with his family. He started off as a butter peddler, and then moved to this site on Meadow Street. This is a great image looking down the street towards the train station. On the left-hand side, in the middle of this section here, he had a little lunch spot, and he sold his first hamburger, which was not just a burger on a plate, it was in a sandwich. And he was making steak sandwiches. He was also being asked to make a a hamburg patty in a sandwich, which had not yet been done in this city. That's what they looked like. So for my meat lovers, you guys, that's it. We've crossed the line. You can't go back now. You must have a meal. So this would satisfy most people's craving for meat. It's the works, tomatoes, onions, a little cheese spread on the toast. The broilers were patented in 1898. Those are the original three broilers they've been using. They get refinished over time. They have to do work on them. They let the fat drip off. The toaster on the left is from 1929. And the original site, thank you to Joe Taylor for amazing collection over your entire life of great photos. This is from your collection. This image of Louis' lunch on the right-hand side, the Texaco station in the middle was actually, he moved here in 1908 to this little tiny building on the side of a tannery, which made harnesses and belts and such, and opened up there. That's where everyone, actually the old timers would remember it. This is what it looked like on the inside with his son Irwin at the helm, the old way with a few stools, and it was kind of just a small low-key place. By 1950, they were saying we started something, the originators of the steak sandwich at least. And so that's the Yale Daily News ad showing that. And here's a view looking in 1967, 66, excuse me, showing the establishment of Louis' Lunch in color. That's how it looked on George and Temple Streets. But they were threatened with demolition. They built the Temple Medical Center there, and it took 10 years to fight off demolition, but finally they moved the building. Here it is being moved in 1975. There's the Knights of Columbus Tower behind. They moved it to Crown Street, where it lives today. People put their heart and soul into this. The left-hand side is the original building. The right-hand side was added. There's pieces of Machu Picchu, Kilauea, the Acropolis, the Roman Colosseum in here, and people sent bricks from all over the world. And it shows you that the love and passion for the hamburger is real. Fourth generation run, still the same way. They got in the Library of Congress, again, thanks to Rosa DeLauro, as the birthplace of the hamburger sandwich. Even if they weren't the first one in the whole country, which we now can research, we can acknowledge they're the last one. They're the longest surviving one, and it's the real deal. So you got to make a pilgrimage there. That's all I'm going to say about that. But I'm going to move on to bagels, because we have so many different kinds of foods here. Our city is an immigrant city, always has been, always will be. And this place is Oak Street, long time ago off of Congress Avenue. And on this street, a lot of the Jewish community came into. And so this shows you in about 1930 or so. And that's about the time that a guy named Harry Lender showed up in New Haven. And he started a bagel company called the New York Bagel Company at 126 Oak Street. He had originally settled in New York, worked for a guy in New Jersey, then heard about New Haven having an opportunity. A guy was selling his business, and he took it over, and he started making, we're not going to call them New York style bagels, but he was appealing to the idea of New York at the time, which you could do to kind of get attention. He started out in this area. This is a Sanborn map, started in 1901, updated to 1923. And right on the bottom, in the middle, there's an area that actually says oven, and then bake, HO, which stands for bakehouse. And that indicates there was a large coal-fired oven, which is how he made the bagels. Here's Harry on the left, and all of his sons together eating bagels, enjoying, and they're in the back of their delivery truck. And they moved by this time to Baldwin Street, and they took over an Italian bakery. They made their bagels again in coal-fired ovens in a very special way. And it was Murray Lender, known as Murray or Morris, but he's known as Murray, who really upped the level of the game. And so here he is on the top in his high school graduation photo, and there he is on the bottom, full of bagels. But what he did is he went to Pepe's in the 40s. He sneaked out with his friends after high school, and he went to Pepe's, and he saw what a big deal Pepe had done. Frank Pepe, with his large pizzeria, making pizza look glamorous. And he said, why can't we do this with bagels? And that's what they did. They started freezing bagels as a kind of a need. When people were demanding bagels on a Sunday, it required the Lender family to make bagels all day on Saturday, which is the holy day, it's Shabbos. And instead, they said, let's freeze bagels and see what they do when they thaw. And nobody noticed the difference. So they can now make bagels every day, thaw them when they needed them. And it became a huge business. This is on Baldwin Street in the Hill. This is starting the automation of bagels when they could really get the bagels going. Frozen bagels became the new thing. And here they are opening up their 1969 plant in West Haven, big plant, man, they were getting huge. Look at that bagel, it's huge. I don't think that was real. And they became known as America's #1 bagel by the late 60s. I mean, everybody knew what a bagel was because of Lenders. They would not have known that if they had not frozen and shipped them. They even eventually got to this giant plant solely making bagels. It's the world's largest bagel plant in Mattoon, Illinois. Does it make the best bagels anymore? No, but it does have a history going back to our bagel history. And and of course, with our connection to this delicious pizza that we've been making here forever, why is Lenders introducing the frozen pizza bagel? Now, this is from 1979, and the three brothers who were part of the business were, looking at each other saying, we got to do pizza bagels. That's what it looked like. Hey, I made a pizza bagel when I was a kid. Those were fun. Little sauce, little cheese, whatever you had, sprinkle some oregano on it, put it in the toaster oven. And that was normal. And I would use my Lenders bagels out of the freezer to do it. So that's not the bagel we need today, though. Or that's not even the pizza we need. I think we need that pizza. So Frank Pepe, here he is, came from Maiori, Italy. We had more immigrants coming to this city from Italy than any city in America. We were a huge immigrant city, but the Italians became 1/3 of the population, and most came from southern Italy and Campania. And Frank Pepe was a baker. He started his business as a backyard bakery. This is his first advertising pic showing amazing large anchovies and garlic and tomato on a pie. And he delivered pizza to the factories and delivered it out to people who were hungry. This is an example of his first ad in 1926 in the phone book. Francesco Pepe, but known as Pepe. Back then, he was known as Frank Pepe. It's not funny, but that's what he wanted to Americanize his name to, Pepe. Pepe. So here he is in the old oven with his wife, Philomena, the business manager. She could read, write, and speak English. There's the dough out front. There's his pizza in front of him. You can see in his hand, he's got a knife. He cut it with the knife. On the right-hand side is his niece, Sarah Consiglio, of course, the Sally's family, because they all work together. You can see in this image on the left-hand side is Frank Pepe. This is about 1929. His brother, Peter, his little nephew, Tony Consiglio, his cousin, Tommy, and his other nephew, Sally Consiglio, with the pizza in front of him. And Sally's has a long history, of course, in New Haven. They were nephew and uncle here in the same photo at the spot. And Pepe moved to 157 Worcester Street in 1936. Here's an example of their old pizza box, which is also very historic. It shows you that inside the photo of the pizza box was another pizza box. He was holding a pizza on a pizza box. So the ingenuity of New Haven's pizza makers was that they needed to stack these things up to deliver them so much. And so they created pizza boxes, as far as we can tell, for the first time in New Haven. Here he is, Pepe, in front of his place, about 1945, super proud. This is a shining moment. This is a big deal. It became an American food, thanks to Frank Pepe and others. And this is what the white clam pie looks like. Get your mouth saturated. This is real. This is the thing. Clams. We started out with seafood. Well, guess what? Seafood goes on pizza. And Frank Pepe was one of the pizza makers to help ratify that. He invented the white clam pie. Just sauce, oregano, garlic, like my mouth is watering, and olive oil all together with the clams. You don't need any mozzarella. You don't need the red sauce. The sauce is the brine. And this is it. I'm not holding back on this page. This is from my book. It's one of my favorite pages. That got my wife, I got Dan Tontini, his father, Paul. I got them all to take these amazing close-ups of pizza. And you can see the plain, which is the sauce. It's the baker's, the original pie on the left, the mozzarella on the right. And you can see some differences in maybe their crumb, the way air escapes or builds in their dough, and charring, and the way the crust bends and gets crunchy and delicious and melds with the sauce and the cheese and becomes one thing. And my book, of course, came out of all this, is the passion behind it. I think we've explained that clearly. There's enough to talk about. There's a book worth, there's a movie's worth, there's now another show out there. There's a lot to do, and we're doing a play, a museum piece, you name it. And Pepe's is turning 100 this year. So 1925 they started, and let the news show that they have this amazing history. There's the old oven at the spot. They're still going. They have 3 ovens in New Haven that all cook coal, and they have 17 locations in 7 states. So Pepe's is not going anywhere anytime soon. Sally's is also going strong. Modern, Zupardi's, you name it, some of the most historic places, they all have a connection. And their connection is that they were immigrants who came here, became successful, brought out their amazing food. And why do we say abits? Well, pizza in Italian, la pizza, they spoke Campanian. So instead of saying la pizza, they'd say abits. And it was two words with an apostrophe eventually combined. These guys were mostly illiterate. So what they spoke, they put into a word. It was probably, and originally we see a apostrophe Pizza, but pronounced abits. If you see it, say it. Now, what have we had done? I'm almost done here, but the news isn't. So we got the governor, Ned Lamont, to declare New Haven as the pizza capital of America last National Pizza Day in February. We then took that up a notch and chartered an airplane from New Haven's Tweed Airport to Washington, D.C. with 105 pizza makers, politicians, veterans, family members, community members, you name it. And we went to Washington, where I got to sit on the plane and use the walkie-talkie phone, which was my favorite part, perhaps. But we had a fun time on this plane down to Washington, and we declared New Haven the pizza capital of America. There's our contingent, Mayor of New Haven, Justin Elicker. I'm next to Ricky. Billy Bustari is picking my ear, and Jennifer Kelly from Pepe's is there as well. And Rosa, of course, we couldn't do this without Rosa DeLauro. And so you have so many different people up there. I see Jimmy from Zupardi's up there, and so many people coming together to make something great. Here's the actual congressional record statement read in the floor in Congress last year, May 22nd. We are in the books. We are making news. We're making headlines, making street signs, you name it. We have it. And I just want to give you that background to tell you why New Haven is important again, and why food is so important to New Haven. It brings us together, it creates some news, it feeds us, and it makes us satisfied. And I party around it. This is our Beats Feast with the New Haven Grand Prix. It's coming back. Put it on your calendar, September 12th, Friday, right in front of Yale, right on the green. The tallest pizza statue in the world, 13-foot statue by Michael Pollock. It's a pizza capital statue, fastest bikes you'll ever see. Whoops. And amazing time. We're going to have the largest pizza party in the Guinness World Record coming this year. Look how many people there are. We're going to double that, and we're going to get a record for it this year. Stay tuned. So I'm really, really excited about this. Thank you so much for joining. These are some of my books, movies you can see. I love doing this. I'm here for questions and answers. And I just want to thank Mike Morand and the team from the Beinecke and Yale Archives for having me. You guys are awesome.